I'm Major April Jameson, 33 years old, and I've spent the last decade flying F-16s for the U.S. Air Force. For years, I missed birthdays, holidays, and milestones to serve my country and to show up for my family whenever I could. But at my sister's wedding, when her friends mocked my service and she laughed along, I realized just how invisible my sacrifices had become. Have you ever been dismissed or humiliated by the very people you've supported your whole life? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about boundaries, respect, and reclaiming your worth. What happened next? You'll see. I stood at the back of the hotel ballroom, champagne flute in hand, watching my younger sister Rachel glide across the dance floor in her custom Vera Wang. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light over 200 guests, all here to celebrate her perfect day with her perfect groom. I'd flown in from Nellis Air Force Base 3 days ago, taken leave I couldn't really afford to miss, and somehow still felt like I was crashing someone else's party. April, you made it. Rachel had squealed when I arrived at the rehearsal dinner, her voice hitting that pitch that meant she was performing for an audience. She'd hugged me quickly, then stepped back to examine my outfit with barely concealed disappointment. Oh, you wore that. I'd chosen a simple navy dress, conservative and clean. Professional. The kind of thing that wouldn't draw attention. I can change if no, it's fine. She'd already turned to greet someone more important. Just, tomorrow, maybe something with color? And definitely not your uniform. We want everyone relaxed and happy, not all formal and military. I'd nodded, smiled, let it go. This was her weekend, her moment. I was just here to show up and be supportive. But even then, standing in that rehearsal space, I'd felt the familiar distance, the gap that had been widening for years between who I was and who they wanted me to be. The seating chart had been the first real sting. During the cocktail hour, I'd found my place card at table 12, tucked in the back corner near the kitchen doors. My parents were at table 3. The maid of honor, Rachel's college roommate, was at the head table with the wedding party. I was seated with distant cousins I hadn't seen since childhood and a few coworkers from the groom's office. "So you're the military sister," one of them had said, a guy named Brad or Chad with expensive cologne and a loosened tie. "Rachel mentioned you're in the Air Force." "That's right." "What do you fly?" "Like cargo planes." "Fighter jets, actually." "F-16s." He'd laughed. Genuinely laughed. "Wait, seriously? I thought that was just a Top Gun thing." "Do they actually let women?" He'd caught himself, but barely. "I mean, that's cool. That's really cool." The conversation had moved on quickly after that, the table returning to safer topics like real estate prices and vacation destinations. I'd stayed quiet, cutting my salmon into small bites, nodding when appropriate. This was fine. I was fine. Then the best man had stood up for his toast. Ryan Hale. The groom's college roommate, now working in private equity in Manhattan. He'd started with the standard jokes, stories about Ethan in his fraternity days, embarrassing photos projected on a screen, the usual wedding reception material. Everyone laughed. Rachel glowed. The evening felt like it was settling into its rhythm. Then Ryan's gaze had landed on me. And we can't forget Ethan's new sister-in-law, April. He'd raised his glass in my direction, and 200 faces had turned to look. "April's in the Air Force, which is just incredible. Really serving our country out there." Polite applause. I'd nodded, tried to smile naturally. Although, Ryan had continued, his grin widening, "I gotta ask, so you were in the Air Force?" He'd emphasized it like past tense, like a phase I'd outgrown. "What did you do? File paperwork? Coordinate supply chains?" "Because Ethan was telling me you're a major, and I looked it up, that's what, middle management." More laughter from his side of the room. "I'm just saying, real pilots fly for Delta, right? They get the big jets, the international routes, the hotel points." The laughter had gotten louder. Someone near the front had shouted, "And the better pay." I'd felt my mother's eyes on me from across the room, that pleading look that said, "Please don't make this awkward, just laugh it off." My father had suddenly become very interested in his water glass. Ryan hadn't been done. No, but seriously, April, were you ever in combat? Or was it more of a desk job situation? Because I feel like people hear military and think it's all Call of Duty action scenes, but most of it's just bureaucracy, right? Lots of paperwork and meetings about paperwork. Ryan, come on, someone had murmured, but half-heartedly. The best man had shrugged, still grinning. I'm just curious. It's cool either way. Thank you for your service and all that. He'd turned back to the crowd. But anyway, let's talk about what really matters, Ethan and Rachel. The toast had continued. The room had moved on. But I'd stayed frozen in my seat, my champagne untouched, feeling every eye that had lingered a second too long, every smile that hadn't quite been sympathetic. Lieutenant Paperwork. That's what he'd called me. And my sister, my own sister, had looked straight ahead at the head table, laughing at whatever the maid of honor whispered in her ear. I'd excused myself quietly, weaving through tables toward the bar at the far end of the ballroom. The bartender had been kind, professional, asking if I wanted something stronger than champagne. I'd shaken my head. I just needed space. Air. A moment away from the noise and the laughter that still echoed in my ears. Glenlivet, neat. A voice beside me had said, deep, measured, the kind of voice used to being heard without being raised. I'd glanced over. An older man, late 60s maybe, stood beside me at the bar. His posture was unmistakable even in a tuxedo, shoulders back, chin level, hands relaxed but purposeful. He'd carried himself with the kind of presence that didn't announce itself but couldn't be ignored. He'd noticed me looking and offered a polite nod. Thomas Mitchell. Father of the groom. April Jameson. Sister of the bride. He'd accepted his scotch from the bartender, then paused, his eyes dropping to my wrist where my bracelet had shifted, revealing the edge of ink dark blue against my skin. His expression had changed. Subtle, but definite. His glass had stopped halfway to his lips. Ma'am, he'd said quietly, his tone shifting into something I recognized immediately. May I ask about your tattoo? I'd pulled my sleeve back slightly, showing him the full design, a stylized phantom silhouette with wings spread over compass points and coordinates. Small, precise, meaningful. The kind of ink you earned, not bought. His eyes had widened. Just barely. Phantom one. It wasn't a question. The ballroom noise had seemed to fade, the DJ, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all of it receding into background static as he'd set his glass down on the bar with careful deliberation. Your phantom one, he'd repeated, and this time there was something else in his voice. Recognition. Respect. Maybe even disbelief. I'd nodded once. He'd straightened fully then, his jaw tight. Then he'd turned, his voice cutting through the reception chatter with startling clarity. Ryan. The best man had looked up from the head table, mid-laugh at something someone said. Come here. Now. The room had gone quiet. Not all at once, but in waves, tables nearest the bar first, then spreading outward as people registered the tone in Thomas Mitchell's voice. The DJ had faded the music. Rachel's smile had frozen. Ryan had approached slowly, confused, still holding his drink. Sir? Everything okay? Thomas Mitchell had looked at him with the kind of expression that could strip paint. You're going to apologize to Major Jameson. Right now. What? I was just joking around, I didn't mean now. And everyone had gone completely silent. I grew up in Marion, Indiana, a town small enough that everyone knew your family history and big enough to have one good high school and 2 competing pizza places. My father, Michael Jameson, ran an auto repair shop on the edge of town, the kind of business that survived on loyal customers and honest work. My mother, Diane, kept the books and managed the house with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. Rachel was born 3 years after me, in the spring when the tornadoes usually came through. She was easier than I'd been, according to family legend, slept through the night early, smiled at strangers, charmed everyone she met. I'd been the serious one, the one who asked too many questions and spent too much time in my own head. By the time I was 15, I knew I wanted out. Not out of Marion specifically, but out of the script that seemed to be written for girls like me, graduate high school, maybe go to Ball State or IU, come back, marry someone local, settle down. There was nothing wrong with that path. It just wasn't mine. I'd found the Air Force Academy brochure in the guidance counselor's office during junior year. The cover showed cadets in formation against a backdrop of mountains, all sharp lines and purpose. I'd taken it home, read it cover to cover 3 times, then told my parents at dinner. The Air Force, my father had said, setting down his fork. Like the military. The academy. In Colorado Springs. Full scholarship if I get in. My mother had glanced at my father, then back at me. Honey, that's very ambitious. But don't you think something closer to home? I want to fly. The words had come out more forcefully than I'd intended. Rachel, 12 years old and in the middle of her middle school social drama phase, had rolled her eyes. You can't just decide to be a pilot, she'd said. That's not how it works. It is if you're good enough. I'd applied that fall. Studied every night, ran every morning, did everything the application required and more. When the acceptance letter came in March of my senior year, my parents had thrown a small party, sheet cake from Marsh Supermarket, a few neighbors stopping by, everyone saying congratulations while looking vaguely worried. For years is a long time, my mother had said, hugging me in the kitchen while the guests mingled in the living room. You'll miss so much here. I know. Rachel's going to need you. High school's hard. She'll be fine, Mom. And she had been. Better than fine. Rachel had flourished in high school, homecoming court, student council, a steady boyfriend who played baseball and planned to take over his father's insurance business. She'd been good at being seen, at being liked. I'd been good at being gone. The academy had been everything I'd hoped for and harder than I'd imagined. Reveille at 05:30, classes until 1500, training and drills and inspections until lights out. I'd loved it. The structure, the purpose, the absolute clarity of expectations. You did the work or you didn't. You met the standard or you washed out. No ambiguity, no politics, no one asking if you were sure this was what you really wanted. I'd earned my wings at 23, commissioned as a second lieutenant. My parents had flown out for the ceremony, along with Rachel, who'd just finished her sophomore year at Indiana University. She'd taken pictures of the mountains, posted them on Facebook with captions about supporting my big sis, and spent most of the weekend complaining about the altitude. I don't know how you breathe here, she'd said. Everything's so far away. That was the point, I'd wanted to say. But I just smiled and bought her coffee and promised to visit home more often, even though we both knew I wouldn't. My first assignment had been Kunsan Air Base in South Korea. 12 months flying combat air patrols, running intercept drills, learning to trust my aircraft and my instincts at 30,000 feet. I'd called home once a month, sent photos when I could, missed Thanksgiving and Christmas and Rachel's 21st birthday. It's fine, my mother had said on the phone, her voice tight. We understand. You're serving. But I'd heard the disappointment underneath. The unspoken question, was this really worth missing everything? By the time I'd made captain at 27, I'd been stationed at 3 different bases, deployed twice to the Middle East, and earned my call sign. Phantom 1. It had come during a night operation over hostile territory, classified details I couldn't share even if I'd wanted to, but the outcome had been clean. Mission accomplished, assets protected, 0 casualties. The kind of success that got noticed. The name had stuck. Not just in my squadron, but up the chain. Phantom 1 became shorthand for precision under pressure, for the kind of pilot who didn't flinch when everything went wrong. I'd made major at 33. 04. Field grade officer. The rank where you stopped being a tactical executor and started being a leader, a planner, someone who shaped missions instead of just flying them. I'd been proud. Exhausted, but proud. I'd called home to tell them. My father had congratulated me, asked what it meant for my career. My mother had said that was wonderful, then asked if I'd be able to come home for Rachel's engagement party. I'll try. I hadn't made it. Emergency training exercise, all leave cancelled. I'd send a gift instead, a nice set of kitchen knives, expensive and practical. Rachel had texted a thank you that felt perfunctory. The distance had grown wider over the years, measured in missed birthdays and unanswered calls and visits that never quite happened. But I'd told myself it was normal. This was the job. This was the sacrifice everyone talked about when they thanked you for your service. Family understood. They had to. Except somewhere along the way, understanding had turned into something else. Not resentment exactly, but a kind of polite indifference. I'd become the sister who was always somewhere else, always busy, always in uniform. They'd stopped asking about my work because they didn't really understand it. And I'd stopped trying to explain because it felt like translation without a common language. When Rachel had called to ask if I'd be a bridesmaid, I'd said yes immediately. Really? She'd sounded surprised. Because I know your schedule's crazy, and I don't want you to feel obligated. I'll be there. Whatever you need. Okay, great. Just, maybe don't make it weird, you know? Like, you don't have to wear your uniform or anything. It's not that kind of wedding. What kind of wedding is it? Fun. Normal. Just people celebrating. A pause. I'm really glad you'll be there, April. It's been a long time. It had been 22 months since I'd last been home. 2 years of promotions and deployments and commendations that my family acknowledged with brief phone calls and Facebook likes. 2 years of living a life they couldn't picture and didn't ask about. I'd arrived in Indianapolis 3 days before the wedding, rented a car, drove to Marion. The town looked the same streets, same buildings, same pizza places still competing for business. My parents' house looked smaller than I remembered. April. My mother had hugged me on the front porch, held on a little too long. You look so thin. Are they feeding you? I'm fine, Mom. And your hair's shorter. Regulation. She'd pulled back, studied my face like she was trying to reconcile the daughter she remembered with the woman standing in front of her. Well, come in. Rachel's at the venue doing final checks, but she'll be back for dinner. Dinner had been awkward. My father had asked about flying, then gotten lost when I'd mentioned weapon systems and mission parameters. Rachel had dominated the conversation with wedding details, flowers, seating charts, last-minute vendor issues. I'd listened, contributed when asked, felt like a guest at someone else's table. So tomorrow night's the rehearsal dinner, Rachel had said, scrolling through her phone between bites. Black tie. Ethan's family is hosting at the country club. Sounds nice. His dad's kind of a big deal. Retired military, actually. You two might have stuff to talk about. What branch? Army? Air Force? I don't remember. Something with planes. She'd said it so casually, like branches of service were interchangeable details. I'd let it go. This was her week, her celebration. But sitting there at that dinner table, I'd felt the full weight of the distance between us, not miles this time, but something deeper. A fundamental disconnect in what we valued, what we understood about each other's lives. The rehearsal dinner had confirmed it. I'd worn a cocktail dress, kept my hair down, tried to blend in. But every introduction had felt like an explanation I couldn't quite finish. This is April, my sister. She's in the military. Oh, wow. Where are you stationed? Nellis, outside Las Vegas. Fun. Do you get to the Strip much? Not really, no. The conversations had never gone deeper than that. No one asked about my rank, my responsibilities, what I actually did day to day. They'd treated military service like an extended vacation or an unusual hobby, interesting in theory, but not something they needed to understand. And maybe that was fair. Why should they understand? These were corporate lawyers and financial advisors and pharmaceutical sales reps. Their world ran on quarterly earnings and client retention and promotional cycles. Mine ran on readiness drills and threat assessments and the absolute necessity of precision. We spoke different languages, lived in different realities. But I was still Rachel's sister. That had to count for something. The wedding day itself had started early 0500 way up, old habits refusing to die. I'd gone for a run through the quiet streets of Marion, pushed myself through 6 miles, then returned to the hotel to shower and prepare for a day of photos and ceremonies and celebration. The bridesmaids had gathered in Rachel's suite at 0800. 7 women in matching robes, sipping mimosas and laughing while a photographer documented every moment. I'd stood at the edge of the group, smiled when directed, held flowers and champagne flutes and whatever props the photographer wanted. "April, can you stand next to Rachel?" the photographer had asked. "Let's get a sister shot." Rachel had turned to me, her makeup already perfect, her smile bright and practiced. God, I'm so nervous. Is that weird? It's normal. Were you nervous? At your wedding. I'm not married. Her eyes had widened slightly. Oh, right. Sorry, I thought. Never mind. She'd squeezed my hand quickly, then turned back to the mirror. Can someone fix my veil? It's sitting weird. The moment had passed. Another reminder that they'd stopped tracking my life somewhere along the way, stopped updating their mental picture of who I was and what I wanted. In their minds, I was perpetually on the verge of settling down, getting normal, joining them in the world of marriages and mortgages and minivans. The ceremony had been beautiful, I'd give Rachel that. The church filled with white roses and candlelight, a string quartet playing pachelbel, 200 guests standing as she'd walked down the aisle on our father's arm. She'd looked radiant, genuinely happy. Ethan had cried when she'd reached the altar. I'd stood with the bridesmaids, holding my bouquet, watching my little sister promise forever to someone I barely knew. And I'd felt proud of her, genuinely proud. She'd built the life she wanted. Found someone who adored her, planned a future that made sense to her. That took courage too, just a different kind than mine. But during the reception, that pride had curdled into something harder to name. The seating chart. The dismissive comments. The laughter at my expense. And underneath it all, the realization that had been building for hours, days, maybe years. They didn't see me. Not really. They saw a uniform, a rank, a commitment they couldn't understand and didn't particularly respect. When Ryan had stood up to give his toast, I'd thought maybe he'd keep it light. Standard best man material, embarrassing stories, heartfelt wishes, a toast to the happy couple. But when his attention had turned to me, when he'd made me the punchline, I'd understood something fundamental. I wasn't being teased. I was being diminished. My service, my rank, my entire career reduced to a joke about paperwork and desk jobs. And no one had defended me. Not my parents, sitting 3 tables away, smiling nervously and hoping I wouldn't react. Not Rachel, who'd looked away at the exact moment when his sister should have looked closer. Not anyone in that room who supposedly loved me, supported me, valued me. That's when I'd excused myself. That's when I'd walked to the bar, needing distance more than alcohol. That's when Thomas Mitchell had noticed my tattoo. Phantom one, he'd said, his voice carrying weight that everyone in that ballroom would soon understand. And everything had changed. Ryan had approached the bar slowly, his confident grin fading as he'd registered the expression on his father's face. The room had gone quiet, not silent exactly, but hushed. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone knows something important is occurring, but no one's quite sure what. "Sir," Ryan had said again, glancing between his father and me. "I don't understand, you will." Thomas Mitchell had kept his eyes on his son, his voice level but edged with steel. "This is Major April Jameson. Call sign Phantom 1. She's a fighter pilot with multiple combat deployments. She's earned a Distinguished Flying Cross and an Air Medal with Valor Device. She's commanded tactical operations in hostile airspace and brought her entire squadron home safely." He'd paused, letting that sink in. "And you just mocked her service in front of 200 people. Ryan's face had drained of color. "I didn't know, I thought you thought what? That because she's a woman, she couldn't be a combat pilot? That because she's not flying commercial routes, she's not a real aviator?" Thomas had stepped closer to his son, his voice dropping but somehow becoming more forceful. "You disrespected a superior officer. You disrespected someone who's put her life on the line for this country. And you did it for a cheap laugh." "Dad, I was just joking, apologize." Now. The room had been completely silent now. Even the catering staff had frozen mid-service. I'd stood there at the bar, drink untouched, feeling every eye in the room on me. This wasn't how I'd wanted this to go. I hadn't wanted attention, hadn't wanted confrontation. I just wanted to get through the weekend, support my sister, go home. But Thomas Mitchell wasn't giving me a choice. And maybe, after everything, I didn't mind. Ryan had turned to me, his expensive suit suddenly looking like costume. Major Jameson. I apologize. I didn't mean to disrespect your service. I was out of line. His voice had been quiet, chastened. The words themselves were fine, appropriate even. But they'd felt hollow, extracted under duress rather than offered from genuine understanding. I'd nodded once. Accepted. Thomas had held his son's gaze for another long moment, then dismissed him with a slight gesture. Ryan had retreated to the head table, where Ethan sat frozen and Rachel looked like she wanted to disappear into her wedding dress. The general had turned back to me, his expression softening slightly. Major, I apologize on behalf of my family. That was unacceptable. It's fine. It's not. He'd picked up his scotch again, studied me carefully. Phantom 1. I heard about your operation. Classified details aside, what you did saved lives. A lot of lives. I was doing my job. You did it exceptionally well. He'd paused. I'm retired Air Force. Brigadier General 07. Flew F-15 Eagles back when Carter was president. I know what it takes to earn a call sign like yours. Something in my chest had loosened. Not relief exactly, but recognition. Here was someone who understood. Who knew what the rank meant, what the missions required, what it cost to do this work well. Thank you, sir. No. Thank you. He'd raised his glass slightly. It's an honor to meet you, Major Jameson. We talked for another 10 minutes, shop talk mostly, comparing bases and aircraft and the evolution of combat tactics over decades. He'd asked intelligent questions, listened to my answers, treated me like a professional rather than a curiosity. It had been the first real conversation I'd had since arriving in Indiana. Eventually, he'd excused himself to return to his table. I'd stayed at the bar a while longer, nursing my drink, watching the reception slowly resume its rhythm. The DJ had started the music again. People had returned to their conversations. But the atmosphere had shifted. People looked at me differently now, not with mockery or casual dismissal, but with something closer to wariness. Maybe respect. Maybe just uncertainty about how to categorize me now that the truth was out. Rachel had found me near the end of the reception, after the cake cutting and the bouquet toss, and all the traditional rituals had been observed. April. She'd approached carefully, like I might bolt. Can we talk? Sure. I'm sorry about what Ryan said. He was drunk and stupid, and he was sober when he wrote that toast. She'd flinched. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. A pause. But did you have to make such a scene? I mean, this is my wedding, and now everyone's talking about what? About the fact that your sister's not actually a punchline. That's not what I meant. What did you mean, Rachel? She'd looked at me then, really looked, and I'd seen something shift in her expression. Not understanding exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The recognition that she'd let something important slip away over the years, some fundamental knowledge of who I actually was. I don't know, she'd said finally. I just wanted today to be perfect. It was perfect. You looked beautiful. Ethan seems great. Everyone had a wonderful time. Except you. I'm fine. You're always fine, April. That's the problem. She touched my arm gently. You're always fine, always handling everything, always somewhere else dealing with things I can't even imagine. And I don't know how to, her voice had cracked slightly. I don't know how to be your sister anymore. The honesty had caught me off guard. For a moment, I'd seen her clearly, not the bride in the perfect dress, but Rachel. My little sister. The girl who used to follow me around the house, who'd cried when I'd left for the academy, who'd never quite forgiven me for choosing a life she couldn't follow. I don't know either, I'd admitted. But I'm here. I showed up. I know. And I'm glad. She'd hugged me quickly, then pulled back. I have to go. Ethan's family wants more photos. But we'll talk more tomorrow? At brunch. Sure. She'd hurried away, pulled back into her wedding night. And I'd stood there alone, wondering if tomorrow's conversation would actually happen or if we'd both just pretend this had been resolved. The brunch never happened. Not the way Rachel had promised, anyway. I'd arrived at the country club at 1100 hours, the time listed on the invitation for the farewell brunch. Most of the wedding party was already there, looking exhausted and overly cheerful in that way people do when they're pushing through hangovers with sheer force of will. Rachel and Ethan sat at the center table, still in their bubble of newlywed happiness, accepting congratulations and recounting favorite moments from the reception. I'd found a seat at a table near the windows, away from the main action. Poured myself coffee. Waited. My mother had approached after about 20 minutes. "There you are. We were wondering if you'd make it." The invitation said 1100. 11, honey. Normal people don't use military time. She'd smiled, trying to make it a joke, but I'd heard the edge underneath. The gentle correction of something that made me different, other, inconvenient. Right. Sorry. She'd sat down across from me, folded her hands on the table. Last night was intense. Yeah. Rachel was very upset. This was supposed to be her perfect day, and I ruined it. I didn't say that. But her expression said otherwise. It's just that you could have handled it differently. Ryan apologized. You could have just accepted it quietly and moved on, but instead you let that general make this whole production out of it, and now that's what everyone's going to remember about the wedding. I'd set my coffee down carefully. Mom, he called me Lieutenant Paperwork. In front of 200 people. He implied my service was meaningless. He was making a joke. A bad one, sure, but it wasn't a joke to me. I know, sweetheart. But you're so sensitive about this stuff. People don't understand the military. They don't know all the ranks and rules and whatever else. They're just trying to make conversation. By mocking what I do. By relating to you the only way they know how. She'd reached across the table, patted my hand. You've been gone so long, April. We barely see you. And when you do come home, you're so closed off. So defensive about everything. People are trying to connect with you, but you make it hard. I'd pulled my hand back slowly. I make it hard. You know what I mean. But I hadn't. Or maybe I had, and that was worse. The implication that I should have done more to make them comfortable with my choices, my career, my life. That the burden of understanding fell on me, not them. That I should have been softer, more accessible, less obviously competent at something they couldn't comprehend. My father had joined us then, carrying a plate of fruit and pastries. Everything okay over here? Fine, my mother had said brightly. We're just talking. Good, good. He'd sat down, taken a bite of melon. Hell of a night, wasn't it? Mike, my mother had warned. What? It was. That general really put Ryan in his place. Didn't know our April was such a big deal in the Air Force. Our April. Like I was a possession they'd misplaced and suddenly rediscovered. I'm not a big deal, Dad. I just do my job. Well, apparently you do it pretty damn well. Distinguished Flying Cross, he said. That's major. It's part of the work. Still, you could have mentioned it. We had no idea you'd done anything like that. I'd looked at him, really looked, and seen genuine confusion in his face. He truly didn't understand why I hadn't told them. Didn't grasp that I'd tried, in my way, over the years. That I'd called from deployments, sent emails with vague descriptions of missions, mentioned promotions and commendations in brief phone calls. But they'd never asked follow-up questions. Never wanted details. Never indicated that they'd understand if I offered more. It's classified, Dad. Most of what I do is classified. Right. Secret military stuff. He nodded like that explained everything, then changed the subject. So when do you head back to Nevada? Tomorrow morning. 0500 flight out of Indianapolis. That early? Can't you stay a few more days? Your mother wants to have dinner, just family. I'd glanced at my mother, who'd nodded encouragingly. It would be nice, honey. Just the four of us. Like old times. But it wouldn't be like old times. Old times had involved me being someone else, younger, less certain, still trying to earn approval by being who they wanted. I wasn't that person anymore. And sitting there at that brunch, surrounded by people who'd witnessed my humiliation and then blamed me for the aftermath, I'd realized something fundamental. I couldn't go backward. I couldn't shrink myself down to fit their comfort level. I can't, Mom. I have briefings on Monday. Can't miss them. Surely they'd understand, they wouldn't. And I wouldn't ask. I'd stood up, pushed in my chair. I should go. Long drive back to the hotel. April, wait. My mother had risen too, reaching for me. Don't leave like this. Don't leave angry. I'm not angry. Yes, you are. You're hurt, and I understand that, but do you? The words had come out sharper than I'd intended. Do you understand what it feels like to come home and realize your own family doesn't respect what you do? That they let people mock your service and then ask you to just let it go because it's inconvenient to defend you. My father had stood now too, his expression hardening. That's not fair, April. We're proud of you. We've always been proud. You're proud of the idea of me. You like telling people your daughter's in the Air Force. But you don't actually want to know what that means. You don't want to hear about deployments or missions or what it takes to earn these ranks. You just want me to show up occasionally, smile in photos, and not make things complicated. That's not true, my mother had said, but her voice had wavered. Isn't it? I'd looked between them, these people who'd raised me, who'd driven me to the airport when I'd left for the academy, who'd hung my commissioning photo on the living room wall. When's the last time you asked about my work? And I mean really asked, not just how's the Air Force, but actual questions about what I do, who I fly with, what missions I've been on. They'd been silent. That's what I thought. I'd picked up my purse, slung it over my shoulder. I need to go. Tell Rachel I said goodbye and congratulations. I hope she and Ethan are very happy. April, but I'd already been walking away, navigating between tables of people who'd watched the drama unfold with the kind of fascinated discomfort people feel when witnessing a family fracture in public. I'd kept my head up, my stride even, my expression neutral. Years of military bearing serving me well in civilian chaos. I'd made it to my rental car before the tears came. Not sobs, just silent tears tracking down my face while I'd sat in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the pain that felt both acute and ancient. This had been building for years. Maybe since the academy, maybe before. A slow erosion of understanding, of connection, of the fundamental belief that family meant unconditional support. They'd loved me. I knew that. But love without respect felt hollow. And respect without effort to understand felt meaningless. I'd driven back to the hotel, packed my bags, and called the airline to move my flight up. There was a red-eye leaving Indianapolis at 2100 hours. I'd be back at Nellis by midnight, in my own quarters, in my own world where the rules made sense and competence was currency and no one questioned whether you'd earned your place. The gate agent had been kind when I'd checked in, noticing my military ID. Traveling for duty, ma'am? Heading home. Well, thank you for your service. I'd nodded, accepted the automatic gratitude that Americans offered service members like a verbal tick. It meant nothing and everything. Nothing because it was rote, a social script. Everything because at least it was acknowledgement, even if shallow. On the plane, I'd pulled out my tablet and opened my calendar. 3 briefings scheduled for Monday. A training exercise on Tuesday. Squadron evaluations all week. The rhythm of my life, structured and demanding and comprehensible. This was my world. These were my people. The ones who understood what the rank meant, what the call sign represented, what it cost to fly combat missions in hostile airspace. I'd thought about Rachel's words, "I don't know how to be your sister anymore." The honesty had been painful but true. We'd grown into different people, living in different worlds, speaking different languages. And maybe that was okay. Maybe not every relationship survived growth. Maybe some connections were meant to be seasonal, situational, temporary. But that didn't make it hurt less. The flight attendant had come by with drinks. I'd ordered water, declined the snack pack, closed my eyes against the cabin lights. Tomorrow I'd be back. Back to work, back to purpose, back to the place where I knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. And I'd stop trying to prove it to people who'd never asked. Back at Nellis, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The desert heat hitting like a physical wall when I'd stepped off the plane. The dry air, the distant mountains, the constant rumble of aircraft overhead. Home. In the way that only a military base could feel like home, transient and permanent all at once. I dropped my bags in my quarters, changed into my uniform, and reported for duty at 0600 Monday morning despite not being technically required until 08. Old habits. The CO had raised an eyebrow when I'd walked into the briefing room early. "Jameson. Thought you were on leave until today." Came back early, sir. Caught a red eye. He'd studied me for a moment, reading whatever was written on my face. Family emergency? Family reality. He'd nodded, understanding without needing details. That was the thing about military life. Everyone knew about complicated family dynamics. Everyone had experienced the disconnect between civilian life and service life. It was an unspoken commonality, a shared understanding that made words unnecessary. The briefings had been routine. Threat assessments, maintenance schedules, upcoming exercises. I'd taken notes, asked relevant questions, slipped back into the professional persona that fit me better than any bridesmaid dress ever could. This was my element. Strategic thinking, tactical planning, clear hierarchies, and defined objectives. After the briefings, I'd gone to the flight line. Walked the tarmac, checked on my aircraft, talked to the crew chiefs about the maintenance cycles. The F-16 sat there, sleek and lethal, a machine I understood completely. No ambiguity in how it worked, what it required, what it could do in my hands. "Looking good, ma'am," Senior Airman Chen had said, wiping hydraulic fluid from his hands. "She's ready to fly whenever you are." "Thanks, Chen. You keeping her in fighting shape?" "Always, ma'am. She's the best bird on the line." I'd run my hand along the fuselage, feeling the slight warmth from the sun-heated metal. This machine had carried me through combat zones, through training exercises, through countless hours of flying that had shaped who I'd become. It didn't care about wedding receptions or family dynamics or whether I fit someone's expectation of normal. It just responded to inputs, precise, predictable, reliable. The week had passed in familiar rhythms. Morning briefings, flight schedules, evaluations, paperwork. I'd flown twice, once for a training exercise and once for a proficiency check. Both times, climbing into that cockpit, sealing myself into that cramped space surrounded by instruments and controls, I'd felt a sense of rightness that I never felt anywhere else. At 30,000 feet, the world simplified. Physics and training and instinct. No room for emotional complexity, for hurt feelings, for wondering why the people who were supposed to know you best seemed to know you least. "Phantom 1, you're clear for weapons systems check," the range controller had said during the Thursday exercise. "Copy that." "Beginning systems check." The routine had been calming. Lock the target, verify parameters, simulate engagement, confirm results. Everything by the book, everything precise. And when I'd landed, debriefed, and filed my reports, I'd felt the satisfaction of work done well. Competence recognized by people who knew what they were evaluating. Friday afternoon, I'd been called to the CO's office. Colonel Reeves had been behind his desk, reading something on his computer screen. "Close the door, Jameson." I'd obeyed, then stood at attention. "Sir." "At ease. Sit down." He'd waited until I'd taken the chair across from him. "I've been reviewing your file. Your performance evaluations, your flight records, your commendations. Everything's outstanding. Top of your cohort across the board." "Thank you, sir. I'm putting you forward for promotion to Lieutenant Colonel. 05. The board meets in 3 months, but based on your record, you're a strong candidate." The words had taken a moment to register. Lieutenant Colonel. The rank that separated field officers from senior leadership. The rank that meant increased responsibility, broader command authority, institutional influence. "Sir, I'm honored." "You've earned it, Jameson. Your performance speaks for itself." He leaned back in his chair, studied me. "But I need to know you're committed to the path. 05 means more than just rank. It means leadership beyond your squadron. It means shaping policy, mentoring junior officers, representing the Air Force at higher levels. It's a different kind of service." "I understand, sir." "Do you? Because from what I've seen, you're one of the best tactical pilots we have. But leadership isn't just about flying missions. It's about people. Building teams, managing conflicts, understanding what motivates individuals, and how to bring out their best. Some pilots struggle with that transition." I'd thought about his words carefully. He wasn't wrong. Flying had always been easier than relationships. Aircraft responded logically to inputs. People were messier, more complicated, harder to predict. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the challenge wasn't to find another area where I already excelled, but to grow into spaces that didn't come naturally. I'm ready, sir. I want this. He nodded, satisfied. Good. I'll submit your packet next week. In the meantime, I'm assigning you as Deputy Commander for Bravo Squadron. Captain Torres is running it now, but he needs a strong second to help manage the junior pilots. Consider it a trial run for O5 responsibilities. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I'd left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, purpose aligned with possibility. The promotion wasn't guaranteed, but the opportunity was real. And unlike my family's approval, this was something I could control through performance, dedication, and skill. That evening, I'd called my parents. Not because I wanted their validation, but because some habits died hard. The phone had rung 4 times before my mother had answered. April? Is everything okay? I'm fine, Mom. Just calling to check in. Oh. Well. That's nice. A pause. Your father and I have been talking. About last weekend. About what you said. Okay. We want you to know we're proud of you. We've always been proud. But you're right that we don't understand your world very well. It's hard for us, you're so far away, doing things we can't picture, living a life that's completely foreign to us. I'd waited, letting her continue. But that's our failure, not yours. We should have asked more questions. Should have tried harder to understand. And we're sorry we let those people disrespect you at the wedding. Your father feels terrible about it. It's okay, Mom. It's not, though. You deserved better from us. From your family. Her voice had cracked slightly. Rachel's been calling every day. She's upset about how things ended. She wants to talk to you, but she doesn't know what to say. Tell her I'm not angry. Tell her I understand. Do you? Because I'm not sure I do. I don't understand how we got here, how the distance got so big. I'd looked out my window at the Nevada desert, the sun setting behind distant mountains, painting everything in shades of orange and red. We just grew into different people, Mom. That's not anyone's fault. It just is. But you're still my daughter. You're still Rachel's sister. That has to mean something. It does. But maybe it means something different now than it used to. Maybe that's okay. She'd been quiet for a long moment. I don't want to lose you, April. You're not losing me. I'm just not the daughter you expected. And I need you to be okay with that. I'm trying. I know. And I had known, hearing the genuine effort in her voice. I got recommended for promotion. To Lieutenant Colonel. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. When will you know? 3 months. The board meets in November. We'll keep our fingers crossed. And April? When you get promoted, not if, when, we'd like to be there. For the ceremony or whatever happens. If that's allowed. The offer had surprised me. Not because it was unusual, families attended promotion ceremonies all the time, but because it represented something new. An attempt to enter my world instead of waiting for me to always come to theirs. I'd like that, Mom. Good. That's good. She'd paused. Your father wants to say hi. And April? We love you. We might not understand everything, but we love you. I love you too, Mom. My father had gotten on the line then, gruff and uncomfortable but trying. Hey, kiddo. Heard about the promotion. That's really something. Thanks, Dad. Your mom says we can come out for the ceremony. I've never been to Nevada. Is it really as hot as people say? Hotter. He'd laughed. Well, I guess we'll find out. Listen, about the wedding, I should have said something. Should have stood up for you when that kid was running his mouth. I'm sorry I didn't. It's done, Dad. Yeah, but still. You're my daughter. You've done things I can't even imagine, and you deserve respect for that. From everyone, but especially from us. He'd cleared his throat. So anyway, congratulations on the promotion recommendation. You're going to get it. I know you will. I hope so. You will. Because you're the toughest person I know. Always have been. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important. Weather, his shop, my mother's garden. Normal family conversation, the kind that felt almost comfortable in its ordinariness. And when we'd hung up, I'd felt something shift. Not resolution exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. They were trying. In their own way, on their own timeline, they were trying to bridge the gap. And that was more than I'd had a week ago. The next 3 months passed in a blur of responsibility and purpose. As deputy commander of Bravo Squadron, I'd found myself spending less time in the cockpit and more time in conference rooms, reviewing pilot evaluations, mediating disputes, and mentoring junior officers through the challenges that came with tactical flying. Captain Torres had been a good partner, experienced enough to command respect, but humble enough to welcome input. We developed a rhythm quickly, dividing responsibilities based on strengths. He handled the administrative complexities, the paperwork and protocols. I focused on the human element, the one-on-one conversations with pilots who were struggling or excelling or somewhere in between. "You're good at this," Torres had said one afternoon in October, after I'd spent an hour talking a young first lieutenant through a crisis of confidence following a failed training exercise. "Better than you probably think you are. I'm just doing the job." "No, you're doing more than that. You're actually listening to these kids, understanding what they need to hear. That's not something you can teach." I'd shrugged, uncomfortable with the compliment. Leadership had always felt like my weak spot, the area where I was competent, but not exceptional. Flying came naturally. Command required conscious effort. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the things we had to work for were the things that mattered most in the end. The promotion board had met in early November. I'd submitted my packet weeks before: service record, evaluations, letters of recommendation, a personal statement outlining my vision for continued service. Then I'd waited, because waiting was all you could do once the bureaucracy took over. Colonel Reeves had called me into his office on a Tuesday morning. The results came through last night. I'd stood at attention, heart pounding despite my best efforts at composure. "Yes, sir. Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel Jameson. You made the cut. Promotion effective 1st of December. The relief had been physical, a release of tension I hadn't fully realized I'd been carrying. "Thank you, sir. You earned it." The board was unanimous in their recommendation. That doesn't happen often. He'd stood, extended his hand. "Well done, Phantom One. The Air Force is better with officers like you wearing the rank." I'd shaken his hand, allowed myself a moment of genuine pride. This was mine, earned through years of work, through competence and dedication, and the willingness to push beyond comfort zones. No one could diminish this or reduce it to a punchline. I'd called my parents that evening. My mother had cried. My father had said I knew it 3 times in a row. They'd asked about the ceremony, about dates and logistics and what they should wear. Normal parent questions, the kind that suggested they actually wanted to be there, to witness this milestone in my life. Rachel had called 2 days later. "April? It's me." I'd been in my quarters, reviewing flight schedules for the following week. "Hey, Mom told me about the promotion." "That's amazing. I'm really happy for you." "Thanks." A pause. "I know things ended badly after the wedding. I've been wanting to call, but I didn't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." "I do, though. Because you were right. About everything you said at the brunch. We haven't been good at supporting you, at understanding what your life is actually like. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I let Ryan make those comments without saying anything. I'm sorry I made your service about me and my perfect wedding instead of about you and what you've accomplished." I'd sat down on my bed, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my sister's voice crack with emotion. I didn't know, she'd continued, about the Distinguished Flying Cross or the combat missions or what Phantom One actually means. Mom had to explain it to me after you left. And I felt like the worst sister in the world because how did I not know? How did I never ask? Because I didn't make it easy to ask. Don't do that. Don't take the blame for my ignorance. You tried. You'd call and tell us about promotions and assignments, and we'd say, "That's nice," and change the subject. We treated your entire career like it was a phase you'd grow out of, and that's on us. She'd paused, taken a breath. I want to do better. I want to be the sister you deserve. So if you'll let me, I'd like to come to your promotion ceremony. I want to see what it looks like, this world you've built. I want to understand. Something in my chest had loosened. Not forgiveness exactly, forgiveness implied a debt that needed settling. But acceptance, maybe. The acknowledgement that growth was possible, that people could change if they chose to. I'd like that, I'd said quietly. I'd really like that. The ceremony had been scheduled for the 15th of December, a Saturday morning at Nellis. My parents had flown in on Friday, nervous and excited in equal measure. Rachel had come with them, leaving Ethan behind. "This is about you," she'd said. "Just family." I'd given them a tour of the base Friday afternoon, showing them the flight line, my squadron's ready room, the hangar where my F-16 sat between maintenance cycles. My father had asked technical questions about the aircraft. My mother had taken photos of everything. Rachel had been quiet, absorbing it all, seeing the pieces of my life that had always been abstract concepts made concrete and real. "This is your plane?" Rachel had asked, standing beneath the nose of my aircraft. "My assigned aircraft, yeah. You fly this thing into combat zones." "Sometimes." "And you're not scared?" I'd considered the question. "I'm trained. Fear is just information, it tells you what to pay attention to. But the training is stronger than the fear." She'd looked at me with something like awe. "I can't imagine being that brave." "It's not bravery. It's just doing what needs to be done." "That's what bravery is, April." Saturday morning had dawned clear and cold, the Nevada winter mild compared to Midwest standards, but still crisp enough to require jackets. The ceremony had been held in the base auditorium, a formal military affair attended by my squadron, base leadership, and a handful of invited guests. I'd stood at attention while Colonel Reeves had read the promotion order, then removed my major's oak leaves and replaced them with Lieutenant Colonel's silver ones. My parents had watched from the front row, my father's hand holding my mother's tightly. Rachel had wiped tears from her eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel April Jameson," Reeves had announced. "Call sign Phantom 1. May you continue to serve with distinction and honor." The audience had applauded. My squadron had cheered. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I'd felt completely present in the moment, not wishing I was somewhere else, not wondering if I measured up. Just standing in my uniform with new rank on my shoulders and knowing I'd earned every single piece of metal pinned to my chest. At the reception afterward, General Thomas Mitchell had appeared. I'd been surprised to see him. We'd exchanged emails a few times since the wedding, but I hadn't expected him to drive from Arizona for this. "Congratulations, Colonel Jameson," he'd said, shaking my hand firmly. "Well deserved." "Thank you for coming, sir. This is unexpected." When I heard through the network that Phantom 1 was getting promoted, I had to be here. "You're going to do great things in this rank." He glanced around the room. "Your family came?" "They did." "Good. They should see this. They should understand what you've built." He'd lowered his voice slightly. "I owe you an apology, by the way. My son's behavior at that wedding was inexcusable. I've had several conversations with him about respect and integrity. I think he's beginning to understand. It's not your responsibility to apologize for him, sir." "Maybe not. But I wanted you to know that what happened that night, what he said, was the beginning of an important lesson for him. And for others who witnessed it. Sometimes people need to see real excellence before they recognize their own ignorance." My parents had approached then, my mother beaming. "General Mitchell." What a surprise. He'd smiled warmly, shaking their hands. "Mr. and Mrs. Jameson. Your daughter is exceptional. The Air Force is lucky to have her." My father had straightened with visible pride. "We're learning that. Better late than never." "It's never too late to recognize what matters," the general had said. Then, to me, "Colonel, I hope you'll keep in touch. Officers like you are the future of the service." He'd left after a few more pleasantries, but his presence had meant something. A reminder that respect came from confidence, that recognition was earned through action, and that the opinions that mattered most came from people who understood what excellence actually required. Rachel had found me near the end of the reception, standing by the windows overlooking the flight line. "This is your life," she'd said quietly. "This place, these people, this work. This is who you are." "Yes. I get it now. Why you chose this. Why you stayed even when it meant missing things at home. This is where you belong." I'd looked at my sister, really looked, and seen understanding where there'd once been resentment. "I'm still your sister, though. That doesn't change." "I know. But I think I need to be a better sister to you. The kind who knows what your rank means, who understands what you do when you're deployed, who asks real questions instead of pretending your life is too complicated to understand." She'd paused. "Will you teach me? About the military, about your work? I want to know." "I'd like that." She'd hugged me then, held on longer than usual. And when she'd pulled back, her eyes had been bright with tears. "I'm really proud of you, April. I should have said that a long time ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm so incredibly proud of who you've become." The words had settled something in me, not validation exactly, but connection. The knowledge that the distance could be bridged if both sides were willing to build. 6 months later, I stood in front of 40 newly commissioned second lieutenants at the Air Force Academy, looking at faces that reminded me of my own at 22, eager, nervous, determined to prove themselves worthy of the uniform they'd just earned the right to wear. My assignment as an instructor had come through in February. Lieutenant Colonel rank brought new opportunities, new responsibilities. The Academy wanted experienced combat pilots to mentor the next generation, to share lessons learned in real operations rather than just textbook theory. I'd accepted immediately. Colorado Springs felt different from Nevada, greener, cooler, surrounded by mountains that made Nellis's desert peaks seem small by comparison. The Academy itself was impressive, all sharp angles and modern architecture nestled against the Rockies. Walking those grounds as an instructor, I'd remembered my own cadet days, the exhaustion, the doubt, the moments when I'd wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. "Good morning," I'd said to the assembled class. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel April Jameson. Call sign Phantom 1. I'll be your instructor for advanced tactical operations this semester." Hands had shot up immediately. I'd pointed to a young woman in the front row. "Ma'am, is it true you flew combat missions in Syria?" "I can't discuss specific operations, but yes, I've flown in multiple theaters, including the Middle East." Another hand. A young man this time. "What's it like? Combat flying?" I'd considered the question carefully. These weren't civilians asking out of curiosity. These were future pilots who needed honest answers. "It's methodical," I'd said finally. "All the training you're doing now, the procedures, the checklists, the emergency protocols, that's what takes over when things go wrong. You don't have time to be scared. You just fly your training and trust your aircraft and bring everyone home." "Is that how you earned your call sign?" someone from the back had asked. My call sign came from a mission where I had to trust my training more than I wanted to. We were providing close air support for ground forces that were pinned down in hostile territory. Weather was terrible, visibility near zero, but the troops needed us. I got them the support they needed and everyone made it out. The name stuck after that. I'd seen something shift in their expressions then, not just admiration, but understanding. This wasn't just a job. This was a calling that would demand everything they had and more. "The work we do matters," I'd continued. "Not because we're special or heroic, but because people's lives depend on us doing it right. Every time, no mistakes, no excuses. That's the standard. And if you're not willing to meet that standard every single day, this isn't the right path." No one had gotten up to leave. If anything, they'd leaned forward, more committed. Teaching had turned out to be surprisingly fulfilling. Not easier than flying, nothing would ever be easier than flying, but meaningful in a different way. I'd spent my career being the one executing missions, following orders, making split-second decisions in the cockpit. Now I was shaping the people who would make those decisions in 5 years, 10 years, 20. I'd worked closely with cadets who struggled, who doubted themselves, who wondered if they had what it took. I'd seen myself in so many of them, the women especially, who faced questions about whether they belonged, whether they could handle the physical demands, whether they'd be taken seriously by their peers and superiors. "Don't try to prove you're as good as the men," I'd told one particularly talented cadet named Sarah Chin during a one-on-one session. She'd been struggling with confidence despite having some of the best flight scores in her class. "Prove you're excellent. Period. Not excellent for a woman or excellent despite obstacles. Just excellent. The rest will take care of itself." But what if people don't respect, some won't? That's true. Some people will always see your gender before they see your competence. But those people's opinions don't determine your worth or your career. Your performance does. Your results do. Your ability to bring your squadron home safely does. I'd paused. I spent years trying to make people see me differently. What I should have done was focused on being undeniably good at my job. The recognition followed once I stopped chasing it. She'd nodded slowly. "Is that what happened with you?" The recognition came later. Much later. And from unexpected places. But by then, I didn't need it the same way. I knew my own worth. Word had spread quickly among the cadets that I was willing to have those conversations, the real ones about doubt and fear and what it actually took to survive in a demanding career. My office hours had filled up. Students had come with questions about everything from handling discrimination to managing deployment stress to maintaining relationships when your job required constant travel. I'd answered honestly, drawing on my own experiences without making myself the hero of every story. Sometimes the lesson was about resilience. Sometimes it was about knowing when to ask for help. Sometimes it was simply about showing up and doing the work even when you didn't feel ready. In April, Rachel had visited. She'd flown into Denver, rented a car, driven down to the Springs. I'd given her a full tour of the academy, the chapel, the training facilities, the dormitories where cadets lived in Spartan conditions designed to build character and discipline. "This is incredible," she'd said, standing at the overlook that showed the entire complex spread out below, mountains rising behind it. "You lived here for 4 years?" "Best and worst 4 years of my life. I can't imagine. It's so intense." "It has to be. We're training people to make life and death decisions. There's no room for mediocrity." She'd turn to me, studying my face. "You love it, don't you? Teaching these kids." "I do. It's different from flying, but it matters just as much. Maybe more. I'm shaping the next generation of pilots." "That's a kind of legacy." "Legacy." She'd smiled. "That's very you. Always thinking about the bigger picture." We'd had dinner that night at a restaurant downtown, just the two of us. The conversation had flowed more easily than it had in years. She'd told me about married life, about adjustments and compromises, and the surprising difficulty of merging 2 lives into one shared existence. I'd told her about teaching, about the cadets who reminded me of myself, about the satisfaction of watching someone finally understand a concept they'd been struggling with. "Ethan asks about you," Rachel had said over dessert. "He wants to apologize. Properly, not just that forced thing at the wedding. He doesn't need to. He does, though. He knows he messed up. And, honestly, the whole wedding thing has been good for him. Made him think about his own biases, about the way he treats people who are different from him. He's been better." "Better how?" "He listens more. Asks questions instead of making assumptions. He's even been reading about military stuff, trying to understand what you do." She'd paused. "I know it seems small, but for Ethan, it's growth. Real growth." I'd nodded, appreciating the effort even if I wasn't entirely convinced. "Tell him I appreciate it." "You could tell him yourself. He'd like to have dinner with us tomorrow if you're free." I'd hesitated. Old wounds didn't heal instantly. Trust had to be rebuilt, not simply declared restored. But Rachel's expression had been hopeful, and I'd realized that part of moving forward meant giving people the chance to do better. "Okay, tomorrow works." Dinner with Rachel and Ethan surprised me. He'd been different, subdued, asking real questions about my work at the academy instead of making jokes. He'd been learning about military ranks, about what it took to earn lieutenant colonel, about the commendations I'd received. When he apologized for the wedding, for not respecting my service, I could tell he meant it. Rachel had been educating him about what military service actually meant, commitment to something bigger than yourself. He admitted his career was about money and promotions, while mine was about something different. I'd corrected him gently. Different, not necessarily more important. The world needed both. The evening ended with mutual respect, and that was enough. Back at the academy, my life found its rhythm. Morning classes, flight simulations, office hours. I still flew when I could, maintaining proficiency, but teaching had become central to who I was. General Mitchell reached out in May about serving on a committee for academy reforms. We developed curriculum together, improving combat training integration for cadets. He told me I had good instincts for understanding what future pilots needed, not just technically, but psychologically. I was beginning to see my career's next phase, not just instructor, but someone who could shape how the Air Force trained its people. Strategy over tactics. Systems over individual missions. I turned 39 in July with quiet satisfaction. No existential crisis, Just contentment with where I was and curiosity about where I was going. My parents called. Rachel sent flowers. That evening, looking at photos from the past year, I realized I was genuinely happy. Not waiting for the next achievement to feel complete, just content while still ambitious. I'd found that balance at 39, wearing silver oak leaves and teaching the next generation to fly. 2 years after the wedding, an email arrived requesting I speak at a Women in Aviation conference in Chicago. General Mitchell had recommended me. I accepted immediately, then called Rachel to invite her. She came without hesitation, teasing me about military time but genuinely wanting to be there. Saturday afternoon, I stood before 300 people, high school students, seasoned pilots, aerospace executives, and told them about being 18 and wanting to fly fighter jets. About ignoring doubt, both others and my own. I spoke for 45 minutes about the academy, about training, about realizing you're capable of more than you thought possible, about being the only woman in many rooms and the strength required to keep showing up. I told them their paths wouldn't look like anyone else's. Excellence wasn't about following someone's blueprint, it was about figuring out what you were capable of and pushing past that limit repeatedly. I told them to commit fully, be undeniably good, demand respect through confidence, and never apologize for being excellent. The questions came fast. How do you deal with people who don't take you seriously? I proved them wrong through performance. Did you ever want to quit? Multiple times, but quitting would have wasted all that training. How do you balance military and personal life? Honestly, it's hard. The military demands a lot, and you have to decide if what you get back is worth what you give up. A 16-year-old named Mia waited until the end to ask how I'd convinced my family to support my choice. I told her I hadn't. I just made the choice and proved it was right through my actions. Sometimes you can't wait for permission. You have to believe in yourself enough to move forward anyway. Rachel met me afterward, telling me I'd been inspiring, that girls had cried because I'd made them believe they could do this. Over coffee, she asked if I regretted my choices. I told her sometimes I wondered about a different life, but I felt no regret. This life fit me in a way nothing else could. The cost was what made it meaningful. Easy choices don't define you. Hard ones do. 5 years after the wedding, I returned to the same ballroom for Emma's first birthday party. Rachel wanted me to be part of her daughter's life, really part of it, not just someone who visited occasionally. Looking at Emma, I realized I wanted that too. I'd try to be more present, even if I couldn't promise to make every event. General Mitchell was there along with Ryan, who approached carefully to apologize properly. He'd spent 5 years thinking about respect and humility, reading about the military, understanding his ignorance. He even told the wedding story sometimes as a lesson about checking his assumptions, not about my service. I told him we were good. Forgiveness lightened the load. My father pulled me aside, saying he and my mother had been wrong about so many things. They were reading my articles now, watching my interviews, trying to understand. They wanted to be part of my life in a real way, actual involvement, not just ceremonial visits. Driving back to my hotel, I reflected on 5 years of change. The wedding had been a breaking point, but time and effort had built something new. Not a return to what was, but a different relationship entirely more honest, more grounded, more sustainable. I'd made Colonel 3 years ago. Senior rank, significant responsibility. My speaking engagements had grown more frequent. I'd become someone people cited when discussing women in combat aviation. Not because I'd sought that platform, but because I'd been willing to share honestly about my path. And somewhere along the way, I'd stopped needing external validation. I'd found my own measure of success, lives impacted, students mentored, missions accomplished, standards maintained. The phantom emblem on my wrist had faded slightly, but what it represented hadn't. It was still a reminder of who I was, what I'd earned, the person I'd become through conscious choice and relentless effort. Some people would only see my worth once someone they respected recognized it. But I'd stopped needing them to. I knew my own value now, independent of anyone else's opinion. And that knowledge was the truest kind of freedom. If this resonated, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder to hold their ground. Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. Questions for you. Have you ever been mocked at a family event and stayed quiet? What do you wish you'd said? Where's your boundary now, and who keeps testing it? Should I have accepted the apology on the spot or waited for a real one later? Did the groom's father handle it right or go too far? If you serve or support someone who does, what's the one thing you want people to understand? See you in the next story about respect, consequences, and what changes when you stop asking for permission.